If you're anyone even tangentially interested in film, you've probably encountered the term literally me at some point in the past few months or year. I encounter it almost daily on YouTube, TikTok, Reddit, my high school English classroom. In other words, all the places that you know, like, really matter. The term shows up in memes as satire, but also as something stripped of irony at times. And in this video, I'm going to try tackling why the idea of the literally me has gained so much traction, where it comes from, and mostly my opinion on why the mass fixation on literally me characters is a mass example of audiences lacking media literacy and misunderstanding the point of these characters. I'll be addressing some other videos on the topic, but the purpose of this video is not to serve as a rebuttal to any specific video or YouTuber. There are just some points which I stumbled across in my research that I feel warrant some commentary. So, here goes nothing. In a way, this is actually going to be a difficult video to make, because the line between sincere literally me fans and guys just using the term tongue-in-cheek has gotten extremely blurred over the past few months.
Very nice.
The proliferation of focus on literally me characters has been highlighted by memes and edits focused specifically on Ryan Gosling, particularly when comparing his role in something like Blade Runner 2049 to his character in Barbie. And while I enjoy these edits just as much as the next guy and always get a good chuckle out of them, I think that the mass, psychosis tied to appreciating these memes as memes is nonetheless built out of something which began as genuine, and as it continues to expand, becomes less about the meme and more about reinforcing what genuinely lies behind the meme for new meme enjoyers who don't, in fact, recognize it as a meme. Which is a very convoluted way of saying what I'm trying to say, so let me rephrase that a little. I'm sure that there's like a real sociological name for this, maybe, or something, but today I'm going to call it the book and movie guy proliferation cycle. In step one of the proliferation cycle, an idea is first put out by a single person or a small group of people who genuinely believe in something, such as, say, that Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver did nothing wrong. In step two, other people catch on to this idea. It blows up partly due to incredulity and people satirizing what they feel is a stupid or incorrect opinion, and the idea is exposed to a newer, wider, and probably less in-the-know audience. Finally, in step 3, a new audience is brought aboard the idea, and not realizing that it blew up as a joke, they take the idea at face value, add their own baggage to said idea, and spread it further, thus returning it to step 1 and completing a cycle of proliferation. This can also happen somewhat in reverse, where a small group or individual begins spreading an idea as a joke, but that joke is taken as genuine by the wider audience. In the version of this cycle, everything is the same, it's just that step 1 is not genuine and therefore bleeds into step 2. And to be clear, the cycle doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. For instance, I feel like the proliferation cycle is the tool used to propel Barbenheimer to success. Initially, I don't think the average person had an interest in seeing either, let alone both Barbie and Oppenheimer. Cinema fans did, yes, but the average person probably only had one of these films even slightly on their radar, depending on what demographic they were a part of. But once TikTok caught wind of both films releasing on the same day, the two films initially took on a somewhat conflicting status. Most early memes really focused on children trying to watch Barbie, while in the next screen over, Oppenheimer was shaking the building to its foundations. Other memes focusing on the conflicting tones and content of the films proliferated, with many promoting Oppenheimer as a deep, introspective story about the horrors of science, and Barbie as a silly, goofy romp for little girls. Of course, this later flipped, with many memes citing Barbie as the heavy existential flick and Oppenheimer as children's fare, all before either film had even dropped. Quickly though, the meme changed. Instead of the two films being in conflict, one for the boys and one for the girls, the two conflicting films evolved into a kind of like codependency, which propelled both to success and created a cinematic phenomenon the studios would be trying, in vain, to recreate for years, like forever. The proliferation cycle helped a popular meme format evolve into a multi-billion-dollar success story, and in so doing, elevated not only Barbenheimer to cult status, but also proliferated a subgenre of the Barbenheimer zeitgeist. The literally me.
I just hope that sometime soon, a new wave of filmmakers can make movies for the people. That they'll make films that cause us to laugh and to cry and to point at the screen and say, that's literally me.
Okay, I don't want to throw shade at my fellow YouTubers or get lost in the weeds here, so I won't. Yet. First, I want to take a minute to define what a literally me character is, where they come from, and generally who tends to like them. For those of you who might not be in the know, the literally me character is the type of character usually loved and idolized by film bros. And if you don't know what a film bro is, just go look it up quick. And it's typically synonymous with the Sigma male archetype. And if you don't know what the Sigma male is, just go look it up quick. These are characters like Patrick Bateman, the driver, Travis Bickle, Thomas Shelby, the narrator, Arthur Fleck, and even sometimes characters like the Riddler or the Punisher or Batman himself. These are characters the audience members latch onto because they think the characters are literally them, as in the viewer identifies with the alienation and discontent experienced by these types of characters. On the surface, I think this kind of relationship can make a lot of sense. The driver is especially like a cool guy who drives around, saves the day, and gets the girl. Sort of. But characters like the driver are nonetheless unstable and also stand in direct thematic contrast to characters like Patrick Bateman, who expressly make a point of never changing, never saving the day, and never actually being cool. Just what he thinks other people think is cool.
But they should, because it's not just about the pleasures of conformity and the importance of trends.
On a deeper level, I think this kind of relationship makes absolutely no sense at all, given that these characters are not meant to be role models or meant to be identified or sympathized with. Instead, I think it's pretty clear that the filmmakers behind each of these films are trying to make the audience sympathize with the environments and circumstances behind these characters and what creates them, but not the characters and their actions themselves. This is especially true in the holy trinity of literally me's: Fight Club, Joker, and Taxi Driver, or Drive. I think Drive is more popular but doesn't exist without Taxi Driver. But it's present in pretty much all these movies, including American Psycho. But let's start our dissection with Fight Club. How often do you hear someone quote Fight Club, and what are they quoting? Does your gym bro buddy ever go on a Marxist rant and say, the things you own end up owning you? Does he ever get the Kubrick stare and son of their mark that you are not your job, you're not how much money you have in the bank, you are not the car you drive, you're not the contents of your wallet? After popping the Fight Club disc back into its steelbook case, does he settle into a nice chair and crack open Volume 3 of Das Kapital? Does he perform deep research into 21st century wage stagnation, redlining, and class warfare? No. Why not? Oh, is it because instead he's busy thumping his chest while hammering Bush Light and dancing with his pants off at a wedding while Piano Man plays as he drunkenly screams into your face with very bad breath that the first rule about Fight Club is that you don't talk about Fight Club? Yeah, I'm guessing he does that second one. My mini tirade here is to point out that most Fight Club fans or most Tyler Durden fans don't actually care about the real themes of the movie, the way capitalism puts everyone in a box and sucks the life out of them. They don't care that Tyler Durden is destroyed at the end or that Tyler Durden is literally the villain of the movie. Instead, they focus on men beating the shit out of each other, smoking cigarettes, and being buff because, well, that's a lot easier and simpler than recognizing that Fincher and Polaniak are in fact calling you, the audience, out for your bad behavior, and not telling you that you should be engaging in more of it. In fact, do a little experiment the next time your buddy's favorite movie's Fight Club brings it up. Tell them it's based on a book, and see how they respond. Out of all these films, it's Fight Club that most concerns me because it's the one I hear about the most from the teenage boys I have in my English classes. And to be clear, I don't have an issue with Fight Club or its content or influence or anything like that. I have an issue with people, especially young boys, misreading it and focusing on the wrong things. The number of boys who I'm willing to give a pass to, and the number of men who should really know better, who idolize Durden and think that dealing with valid emotions of discontent and sadness by lashing out through violence is extremely concerning and has a huge overlap with the rise of men's rights influencers like Andrew Tate, but I'll come back to that later. I'm getting off track. In Joker, Arthur Fleck is pretty clearly a victim of society.
What do you get?
I don't think so.
When you cross
I think
a
we're
mentally
done
ill
with
loner
Joker.
with
That's
a
it.
society that abandons him and treats him like trash!
However, as is the case for Fight Club, people rarely focus on the film's commentary about who is to blame for Arthur Fleck and why they're to blame, and instead focus on the fact that Fleck is justified in becoming the Joker specifically because someone else is responsible. The catharsis of the film comes when Fleck kills Murray, and though this is not meant to appear as a positive action, audiences nonetheless latch onto this moment and arc for the character as the right thing to do, or at least, like, the cool thing to do. And yet, the real focus on blame should be on a culture, government, and society which encourages poverty, ignores people with mental illness, restricts access to healthcare, and does nothing about rampant violence. The same rampant violence fans of Fight Club love. But talking about all those things requires social engagement, coming up with solutions, and, well, you know, voting a certain way. But do any Joker fans latch onto these ideas of class solidarity and access to better mental health? No, of course not! They latch onto Arthur feeling sad and lashing out because they're also sad and want to lash out, but society tells them they can't, which reinforces to them the idea that it is not okay to feel the way they do, when instead society is just trying to tell them that
Ken is me.
And lastly, we have Taxi Driver, which is obviously very similar to Joker, on purpose. Or actually, Joker similar to Taxi Driver, but you get the point. Travis Bickle is a depressed war veteran with no purpose or understanding of the world around him. Yes, just like Durden and Fleck, Bickle accurately points out the problems plaguing the world around him. But also like Durden and Fleck, Bickle is wrong in his approach in how to solve or deal with said problems. He has lofty claims and goals about being put in charge of the city and setting things right, but he doesn't actually have any real answers or ideas about how he plans to do these things. Instead, Bickle fixates on one specific symptom of these issues, an underage prostitute, and makes it his mission to save her. And, well, yeah, this is a noble thing to do. Bickle still hasn't solved any of the actual issues which led to her and others being a prostitute in the first place. And look, I get it. None of us can solve all the problems in the world, obviously. None of us can overhaul systems of oppression and poverty or in drug use. It makes sense for Travis to fixate on this one thing or this one girl because it's actually somewhat within his control, and that's exactly what he's looking for. Control. And yet, when faced with someone who may actually stand a chance at changing things for the better, a politician, Bickle kills him. Now, does the film make the case that Palantine is actually a noble man or likely to solve the city's problems? Does just being a politician guarantee change? No, of course not, and the film is pretty abstract what's actually going on with this character, but nonetheless, Bickle taking things into his own hands is a rejection of legislative action that can actually improve the world. Which brings me to the political part of this. In short, most fans of Literally Me characters don't actually really care about improving the world. They only care about improving their own lives. And while, yes, they often have valid and justified complaints and critiques of the world around them, such as dead-end jobs, high cost of living, etc., as mentioned, they rarely, if ever, have actual solutions to these problems or even care about removing roadblocks for others, and instead just want to get even with the people they feel put those roadblocks up in the first place.
Taxes ought not to pay for your bags of fud drowned.
And who are these people usually, the ones that put up the roadblocks? Well, a lot of times to these guys, those people are women. A lot of Sigma, lone wolf type guys blame women for all their problems. This brings me back to dudes like Andrew Tate, who are selling the idea of independent Sigma masculinity to vulnerable men who are already on the verge of lashing out. These are the same guys who hate new Star Wars or new Marvel movies, not because the quality of storytelling is poor, or because the content is creatively bankrupt, or because CGI artists are exploited for corporate and financial gain, but because women are in the movies now. And if you don't believe me, take a look at these comment sections. We got a little r/fuck Marvel action here. This doesn't even get into the fact that all Literally Me characters tend to be white, and all of the difficult and awkward sociopolitical commentary and themes that intentionally or unintentionally come with that. For example, no one, at least none of the Sigma white dudes, are latching on to Eric Killmonger as a Literally Me character, despite the fact that he's a smart, bitter, and capable alpha male who violently lashes out as a result of justified feelings of oppression and neglect by society. What's the difference between Killmonger and all the other Literally Me characters? And to be clear, I'm not saying that Literally Me fans are like racist or making a conscious decision to exclude Killmonger, or that there aren't non-white men who latch onto these characters. I don't think that. I just think that most Literally Me characters speak to a specific kind of white, young bitterness among Gen Z / just making the cutoff millennial dudes. There are a lot of interesting political and socioeconomic reasons which are part of this, and to cover it properly would require like a deep dive into figures like Malcolm X and the uprising black conservatism, but that's not what we're talking about today. The main intersection here is not in the relationship between men of various class and race, but the relationships between men and women in general. With all of that said, I think there is something distinct and important about the relationship between men and women in most of these movies as well, particularly in things like American Psycho, Taxi Driver, and The Wolf of Wall Street. And really, I feel like the point makes itself in regard to American Psycho. Bateman is a rich, upper-class white businessman who views everyone, but especially women, as subhuman meat which exist only for him to slaughter. He abhors and murders prostitutes, but only after using them for his own pleasure. Or, at the very least, he fantasizes about these things. Like Travis Bickle, Patrick Bateman is incapable of having a healthy relationship with a normal woman removed from sex, and lashes out because of it. Do I honestly need to explain why lonely young men identifying with a character's favorite pastime is murdering women might be concerning? It's a little more complex with Taxi Driver. No, Bickle is not nearly as morally reprehensible as Bateman, but my man clearly still has issues. When he takes Betsy out on a date, he famously brings her to an adult film because that's what he has seen other people doing. In a situation where he should be getting to know this woman as a person and has ample opportunity to engage with her in a human way, Bickle nonetheless cannot divorce her from the idea of sex, and consciously or subconsciously brings her to an event dedicated to sex, and in an even less humane or intimate fashion, sex that doesn't involve either of them. But wait, you might say, Bickle's whole goal is about liberating 12-year-old Iris from sexual prison, right? Well, technically yes, but actually, no. While yeah, Travis does kill the people responsible for Iris's less than ideal lifestyle, he still hasn't solved the root causes of it, as mentioned. Iris is still 12 years old, and the film, like Travis, is unconcerned with what happens to her after the film ends. Who takes care of her? How does she recover from her trauma? Does she get to go back to school like Travis said she should and would? Can she have a positive relationship with the family she goes back to? These domestic questions may seem trivial, but they're important when considering a whole individual. What I'm getting at here is that once she's no longer a prostitute, Iris ceases to matter or exist, both to Bickle and the narrative of the film. Divorced from her adolescent sexuality, she is no longer an entity. In this sense, Bickle is figuratively as bad as the pimps in regard to how he psychologically views Iris. He sees her as a symbol of innocence corrupted by the city, just as the pimps and clients see her as a symbol of innocence to be corrupted by the city. It's sort of like a more sexual version of how Holden Caulfield views his sister on the swing set at the end of The Catcher in the Rye, and I don't think that's necessarily an accident. And again, I am not trying to make the case that Bickle is devoid of good intention here, or that killing the pimps is necessarily the morally wrong thing to do. I'm just making the case that the more nuanced parts of this complex issue are often neglected as fans of the film instead revel in the violence and catharsis of Bickle lashing out against people who deserve it to right a solitary wrong, rather than considering the implications of and commentary on this violence Scorsese and co are trying to provide for us through this display of Travis Bickle going so far off the rails. And briefly, since he already came up, I think it's fair to point out that a character like Holden Caulfield is sort of like the first Literally Me, as he's an angsty guy who wanders around the city at night, fueled by discontent and loathing for his fellow man, feelings which are largely products of emotional neglect and general societal apathy as a result of unsustainable, densely populated urban environments. You see this exact same trait in Travis Bickle. Anyway, this is all in a bit of contrast to another movie that I feel is ripe for a Literally Me following, but which for whatever reason doesn't have one. And don't worry, I'm gonna tell you what I think the reason for that is. That movie is, of course, the 2017 film Boss Baby. You Were Never Really Here, starring Joaquin Phoenix. Similar to Joker, You Were Never Really Here focuses on a socially adrift man caring for a sick and elderly mother, and like Taxi Driver, You Were Never Really Here has a protagonist, Joe, who rescues an underage prostitute from her, profession. However, unlike Travis Bickle, Joe lives to survive his film, and hopefully carry out a better life with Nina, who he has just rescued. You Were Never Really Here doesn't exactly get lost in the weeds about the domesticity of Joe and Nina's life after Nina is freed, and Joe isn't trying to exact systemic change, but my point here is that he still continues on. He lives, and he chooses to keep fighting for a better future rather than choosing to be a martyr, which is a huge outlier compared to other Literally Me's, and maybe a part of why he hasn't taken root in the Sigma male zeitgeist in the same way. After all, being a provider is cool, but being emotionally available, present, and mentally nourishing to a partner, friend, or child isn't. That's, honestly, that's kind of gay. That's a job for women. It's the killing because you're sad that's cool. But of course, there is another counter to this that Sigmas love. This may be the best Literally Me character of all time, and he's certainly my favorite. That character is, of course, the driver from Drive. I think that the driver stands out from characters like Lou Bloom, Travis Bickle, Tyler Durden, Arthur Fleck, Rorschach, and all the others because his arc is dedicated to escaping his lifestyle and not just getting revenge on the people who forced him into it. The driver doesn't want to be a bad guy and spends the whole film trying, in fact, to be a good guy. This is in direct contrast to traditional Literally Me's, who make the conscious decision to shrug off the emasculating shackles of society and break bad, in an attempt to reclaim agency by giving into what Do Cinema calls the shadow self, and what's actually a pretty good psychological breakdown despite some kind of odd conclusions or sentiments about Literally Me's that I don't totally buy into. And the mention of that video brings me back to
I just hope that sometime soon, a new wave of filmmakers can make movies for the people, that they'll make films that cause us to laugh and to cry and to point at the screen and say, that's literally me.
So, again, the Kino Corner has a pretty solid and well-written video here. I just politely take umbrage with his conclusion that literally me characters are universal vessels for and representations of what audiences want. Again, I say this as someone who loves all these literally me movies. I also think I have some beef with the implied premise that everyone is craving or yearning to attach to more dark stories featuring literally me's. Yes, there is definitely an audience for that. Hello, I am audience, but also, like, it's a pretty specific audience, and there's a reason they have their own name and get made fun of all the time. Not that the blatant disregard and hating of these films due to a silly goofy fandom is justified, or ever is. I'm just saying that, well, not everyone is literally you, and nor should they be. Additionally, I can't help but imagine a lot of these filmmakers are turning over in their graves, or in their living person abodes, seeing people latch onto and identify with characters they have intentionally made morally reprehensible. Like, I'm sorry. Taking care of your skin, going to the gym, being ambitious, and pursuing your dreams are all awesome, positive things to do. But you don't have to be Patrick Bateman or Lou Bloom to do those things. Holy shit, the whole point here is that you shouldn't be literally them or be inspired by them. I think there's a pretty good cinematic argument against all these characters, and despite this film being extremely popular and successful, it nonetheless had a lot of these sigmas mad at it because it's emasculating or whatever. And that film is, of course, the previously mentioned Barbie. In an albeit lighthearted, somewhat ironic, tongue-in-cheek manner, Greta Gerwig uses Barbie to push back against the idea of the literally me character, and even though I may just be using my Sigma rose-tinted night-driving glasses to look back at this with 2020 hindsight, I can't help but feel like casting Ryan Gosling as Ken wasn't an accident. Again, is this probably made up and me thinking just another casualty of the perpetuation cycle? Yeah, I mean, maybe, but the point still stands either way. Ken's whole arc in this film is a deconstruction of the literally me. He feels used and neglected by society, is viciously emasculated, and as a result, decides to go rogue and take things into his own hands. Where Ken is different from Bickle or Durden, though, is in his approach. Instead of simply lashing out in righteous vengeance against his oppressors, Ken actually enacts systematic change. Granted, it's not meant to be a positive systematic change, but it's a systematic change nonetheless. However, also unlike your average literally me, Ken finds redemption. Like Joe, or even the driver, Ken continues on past his retribution and is given a second chance at life rather than choosing to die the violent death of a martyr. Specifically, the subject of his social grievances, women, specifically a woman, is resolved by his acceptance of himself with help from a woman. Unlike the average literally me, Ken has someone there to tell him how he feels is okay, how he feels is valid, and how he feels is normal, but that it is not okay to hurt others as a result. Instead, Barbie gives Ken a chance to realize who he is independent of his pain and suffering, and independent of her. She makes it clear to him that he has a second path through compassion, and helps him realize what Lou Bloom, Patrick Bateman, Tyler Durden, Travis Bickle, Arthur Fleck, Rorschach, Walter White, Thomas Shelby, and all the others never could. That he is Knuff. And I think that with this message of compassion coming specifically from a female character, it makes sense that so many Sigma males were upset by it, and felt personally attacked by the film's message and depiction of the patriarchy. And yet, I think this backlash explicitly proves the film's point. For example, Ken gleans his understanding of masculinity and patriarchy from shallow snippets provided to him by the media of the real world. He takes horses, presidents, and Greece to be the blueprint. In short, he sees these shallow representations of male existence and decides that they're literally him. He adopts a toxic image based on a misunderstanding of male representation and builds his meaning upon these societal falsehoods, this simulacra of masculinity. Is this any different from the young men who latch onto the worst parts of fictional male characters or influencers like Andrew Tate and decide that, because they have no other positive role model in life and have been set adrift by unfair circumstances out of their control, that this is the unhealthy path they have to take? No, of course it's not any different, because that's literally what the movie is about. All of this stems from a system of grievances based not on compassion, growth, or learning from mistakes, but punishing one's enemies. This toxic bravado turns every heartbreak into a competition and every slight into an opportunity for revenge and retribution. We see this on an interpersonal level between young men and young women, but more and more commonly on a parasocial level acted out through politics and social media movements. This is a reason why I so appreciated the character of Allan in Barbie, because even though I want to be like Ken, the truth is, Allan is literally me. And this is also why I have, again, very polite beef with Kino Corner's video and the conclusion. I don't think the literally me is the universal male experience. Not that Kino Corner makes the explicit case that it is, but I think that to pretend it is the universal male experience, or at least an inspiring male experience all men can learn from and be liberated by, is dangerous, and is exactly the type of mass psychosis, hysteria, mob mentality, whatever, that at their core, movies like Joker and Fight Club are trying to warn men about. When you completely give yourself over to what you view the right or natural version of yourself as based on what someone else, or worse, a set of movies tells you you should be, you have completely forfeited your power as an individual and become a faceless cog in the toxic machine of society. In short, another brick in the wall, another part of the problem. This is exactly what the narrator realizes at the end of Fight Club, and yet, for whatever reason, people still walk away from this movie thinking that the point is to be like Tyler Durden. It's not. And in American Psycho, as well, Bateman is drowned by and subject to standards of high society and capitalism that he can never even hope to meet, partly because they don't actually exist. What results is, as Bateman himself says, a man who simply is not there, and instead is standing in the place of a real human being, saying and doing things without any clue as to what they actually mean.
Cool it with the anti-Semitic remarks.
To return to Allan, I feel like this character is literally me because, well, he's an awkward weirdo who doesn't fit in with the other guys. Ken feels emasculated and is seen as an outsider, or whatever, but he's still a cool, handsome man who is nonetheless coveted by women, just not the woman he wants. Allan is coveted and wanted by no one. He's just Allan. If anyone in Barbie Land has a legitimate reason to snap and institute patriarchy, it's that guy. And yet, he doesn't. Partly because he has even less power than Ken, but also because, well, Allan chooses to change things for the better. Granted, yes, Allan does initially try to escape Barbie Land, but he tries to do so even as part of the potential ruling class. He has everything to gain by staying, but he just doesn't feel like he fits in or agrees with what's happening, so he attempts to escape. After battling some unintelligent Kens, he's drafted back into Barbie Land battle by Gloria and Sasha and helps change the system for the better from the inside instead of just acting out his petty grievances in a type of masochistic martyrdom, as all of the Kens do on the beach. So, no, Ken is not literally me, and I have to say, I don't think he's literally you either. Ken is wish fulfillment, both in a literal and figurative sense. He's wish fulfillment as a toy for children's imaginations, but Ken the idea, or Ken the literally me, is a hollow representation of what men in the fringes of masculinity want to be. As a lot of pro-literally me content points out, the literally me represents things men may want to do but know they can't, such as, commit political violence or, kill women. The driver and Tyler Durden especially are unrealistic figures who live unattainable lives by normal standards. Hyper-traditionally attractive, mean to everyone, agents of chaos, talking most about Durden here. These are characters who do not live attainable lifestyles for most men. This is similar to men, it's me, I'm men, who look at actors like Will Poulter or Chris Hemsworth and think, I want my body to look like that. Well, it's possible because they did it, obviously. It's not attainable because me and most of my fellow men with small, effeminate wrists also work full-time jobs, don't have money for a personal trainer, can't spend half our day at the gym, can't eat highly specialized foods whenever we want, or do everything else necessary to have such an unnaturally ripped body. Similarly, most average men can't, and shouldn't, attempt to follow the lead blazed by characters who break bad. Why? Because being a meth kingpin or imagine their friend Edward Norton is not fucking realistic. That's why. And I also don't think that's the right why question to be asking. So then, what is the right why question? I think it's this. Why do we, as men, feel this way in the first place? I'll give you a hint. It's not just women, it's other men. Full disclosure here, in the interest of self-awareness, I'm not as down bad as a lot of guys out there, but I've still felt like my feelings didn't matter and like the world didn't care about me. I felt like Travis Bickle in the narrator. But really, most of the time, I've just felt like, I didn't really fit in. And as I get older, that's fitting in mostly with other guys my age. My priorities and interests have never been the most traditionally masculine. I played football and I enjoy working on cars as much as the next red-blooded American man, but god damn it, sometimes I'd rather sit inside and read a book, or write something, or listen to Lana Del Rey and Halsey. My feelings get hurt really easily, man, and I spend a lot of time thinking about mine and other people's emotions. And honestly, I think this is probably the case for a lot of guys. I think a lot of guys just don't like admitting their feelings get hurt easily, or that they would rather stay home alone and play video games than go out. I think there's a lot of pressure on and between men to behave a certain way, just like there's a lot of pressure on and between women to behave a certain way. And I think that in women, these insecurities typically manifest in stronger bonds or female friendships, whereas in men, they manifest in feelings of isolation, anger, or competition. There are a lot of complex reasons for this, but at their core, I think this makes a lot of us Allan, when really we want to be Ken. But because we don't have the positivity or aren't willing to open ourselves up to the sensitivity of Allan, we think we need to become Tyler Durden. And honestly, we don't. Like, at all. I know that not everyone has the same opportunities or experiences or anything like that, but I think we need to stop focusing our energy on being like characters who have nothing to offer but pain, and who tell us that the only way for us to get rid of our pain is to give it to someone else. In Juice Cinema's video, How Literally Me Characters Can Improve Your Life, I think he actually has a pretty good message at the end, which focuses on genuine self-improvement and overcoming flaws rather than lashing out. He uses the example of characters like Harry Potter or Zuko who have a piece of evil inside them, or as he terms it, the shadow self, but who overcome said evil. I think characters like Zuko or even the driver are much better sad boys for guys to latch onto, specifically for the reasons that they grow up and change. They don't give in to their race instincts and simply lash out. They take the path of compassion, like Ken, and mature as a result. The last point I want to bring up here are two works by Stephen King, his Bachman novels Rage and Roadwork. In both stories, the protagonist is a rightfully hurt and angry man who decides to get even with the world and show everyone exactly what he's feeling. Both are justified in their, well, rage, but in the end, both characters still lose. Why? Because as Stephen King is well aware, rage can only take you so far. Rage is not the answer. It does not solve problems or provide you with answers. Rage should not be literally you. Instead, as King writes in Roadwork, he closed his eyes and his last thought was that the world was not exploding around him, but inside him. And while the explosion was cataclysmic, it was not larger than, say, a good-sized walnut, than white. In other words, there is no happy ending for the literally me. Your only shot at a happy ending is realizing that, at the end of the day, you are already enough.